Hey, let me check in with the novel Daryl by Jackie S., which, I don't know if it's 2020 or 2021. I think it's somewhere in there. It is a novel about Daryl Cook, who is a self identified cuck. He gets off on being cuckolded by his wife and getting to watch, getting to sometimes participate, sometimes just listen. And it's very much a novel about him both philosophizing about it, like saying, like, well, if you actually looked at it in a certain way, uh, the grand majority of men are cucks. He is he has just accepted the reality of the situation, that he is oppressed, that he is at the bottom of the power hierarchy. You know, our the pattern of power in this society is the power is concentrated at the very tippy top amongst very few, and that he is actually he feels like he's got the right adaptation, that by accepting it and actually getting pleasure from being submissive, being dominated, being humiliated, being, all that, he and enjoying it, he is actually the one who is seeing the reality and having the best adaptation to that. Now, this is undermined by the fact that at the beginning of the novel, he ODs, he possibly tries to kill himself, it seems, by taking G, overdosing on G, I think it is, going completely out of control, to the point that he is in the hospital and indeed checks himself out against medical advice. Um, the people that he surrounds himself with, his wife, Mindy, who is admittedly, I mean, and in some ways, Daryl admits this himself, he's mostly focused on guys. So Mindy gets very little space in this book. So what we see of her is through Daryl, and that is very limited. And what it looks like is Daryl has inherited a bunch of money, and Mindy is taking his money and getting to sleep with as many guys as she wants, and getting to have power over Daryl. And that might be seen as exploitative, except Daryl enjoys it. He is aware of it. I don't know. Um, One of the men in her life, Clive, seems to be maybe a really dangerous guy, manipulative, cold, possibly not a psychopath, a sociopath, uh, full of lots of theories. It's with him that he gets that Daryl gets the idea that he might be a border, he might have borderline, what's it called, borderline disorder, borderline personality, which, I mean, I know from through Ja, that is sort of a DSM kind of catch-all, that they oftentimes put difficult women in that category of troublesome. It's almost like the modern equivalent of hysteric, in a way, or just shit that they just don't know what else to do with it. So you end up as a borderline personality, and that's what the diagnosis that Clive gives him. It's interesting that a lot of the psychological labeling comes from a sociopathic manipulator who may or may not have murdered someone. The book has this kind of a murder mystery in it, where Clive 15 years ago may have murdered a very submissive, twinky, kind of gay hustler who maybe was already sick and wanted to die. I mean, a lot of people talk about it more as a suicide by Clive, perhaps. Um, Turns out that another guy that has fucked his wife, Bill, is someone that he develops more and more of a relationship with, wants to more and more be, wants Bill to be his man and for him to be his sort of woman. It's interesting that Jackie S is a trans woman, And she does include stuff in here about kind of lesbians not particularly liking trans women, and there seemed to be some grudge between the two. And Daryl's like, oof, not my fight. Glad I don't have to go there, which is interesting. Kind of, that's definitely Daryl perspective. Definitely Jackie S as a trans woman is very much more in the thick of that. And I mean, good lords, trans exclusionary feminists are a thing in the world and are actively working against trans people, as you know, as seen by J.K. Rowling's boosting of them and all that. Um, so there's a trans woman in the book who gives advice, and Daryl's like, she wants me to be trans too, because when she sees the whole world through being trans, which is funny because when Daryl says that, he sees the whole world through very much a cuckold lens. And there's the whole thing about cuck being a right wing insult, and he feels a certain amount of resentment that it's been politicized and turned into a political thing where it's like, no, it's who I am. It's or at least it is, but he wavers through this identity, and like he's getting more and more close to Bill, and it's like, oh, I could be gay. And there is that thing about saying borderline personalities have very fragile egos. They shift from one thing to another thing. It's kind of like a talented Mr. Ripley setup there. Of you change personalities depending on who you're with, that kind of idea. And yeah, the whole thing of Daryl is spelled Darryl. No I. There's no I in Daryl, which that's the whole identity. That's the whole I of ego thing. It's hissing at the dog. So yeah, it's an interesting book, and it's very, very concerned with. Daryl's very concerned with, and the book is very concerned with the kind of idea of masculinity, of manliness, of what is a man, in a way that's it's really interesting. I failed to remember Detransition Baby by damn it, now I've forgotten her name, but the novel Detransition Baby by Laurie Peters, and how that book had a lot to say about sexuality and a certain thing about maleness in it. And I get that even more so with this book, where, it's the whole thing is being a man, being the dominant alpha. That's a real man. It's a big dick who's going to be powerful. And Darrow's very legitimate point of, well, we can't all be at the top of the heap. What are all the men underneath? And I know that there's like kind of the whole thing of alpha and beta males, but that's definitely seen as less masculine, which is like kind of nonsense. It's a kind of an idea of masculinity which gets its power by emasculating, by making the majority feel like shit, so we can have one male to look up to, and it's the patriarchy writ large, which is really damaging to all the men. Whether you're the very top and you're super insecure about being at the top because there's all the other ones below you who just want to claw their way to the top. It's horribly confrontational. It's horribly unstable and crazy making. So yeah, it's been a good book to get into, and yeah, it's little short sections, which is very kind of digestible that way. All told from Daryl's point of view. He keeps on talking about people say I should write a book or things like that, and it's very much told in his kind of his voice of the forums in a way. Yeah. Okay. All right. And with that bark, I will end the check-in. That's Daryl by Jackie S. More videos later.